Hi, I'm Casey, and I'm the creator of PodTalk. And in this demo, I just want to give a quick overview of PodTalk, how it works, and specifically how the groups work. So first off, PodTalk is basically like your standard podcast app, just like Overcast or Pocket Cast or the Apple Podcast app. And it has all the features that you would expect in a podcast app like that. So you can subscribe to feeds, make playlists, download episodes, and it even has some of the advanced features like skip silence and enhanced voice. And I really tried to make a podcast client that could compete with the best ones out there. But again, in this demo, I'm not going to go too much into the client and its features. If you're curious about that, you can actually, the best way to learn more is just download the app, or you can check out the feature list that I put in the description in this video. So I'm going to switch over from the podcast tab over to the groups tab, where we can learn more about how groups work and what makes this podcast app different from all others out there. So the first thing I want to do is just give you a quick overview of stuff you can do in groups. So once you have a group, you can comment on episodes. And what's different about PodTalk comments is that these comments will stay private to your group. So only other group members can see these comments or reply to these comments. And what's also cool is that it's not just text. You can actually leave voice comments as well. And I'll show you how that works in just a sec. So in addition to just leaving comments, you can actually take those comments and automatically embed them into your podcast. And we'll see that in just a sec too. There's also a chat room, which sort of acts like a lobby. Like maybe you want to talk to the group, but it's not necessarily about an episode. You can talk with each other in the chat room. And then there's a whole lot more, and I'll go into that in a sec. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a group to see how that works. And you got these options here about what kind of group you want to make. I'm going to choose this I'm a host option, and this is when you want to make a group specifically for your podcast. And the first thing you do is you find your podcast. And what this is going to do is going to take the information from your feed and kind of pre-fill in some of your group information. Next, we have to choose whether we're going to have a private or a public group. And what private group means is that only people who get a one-time use invite link can join the group. If you're in a public group, that means anyone who gets a join link to the group, they can join, or they can even join straight from the app in the app directory. And that's the one we're going to go with. We're going to go with public. And this filled in use the name of the podcast for the group name. I'm just going to shorten that a little bit, make it a little cleaner. And then for the group description, it just pulls in the podcast description, and you could edit that if you want. I'm going to just get rid of that and have an empty group description. And then it takes the image from your feed and uses that for the group image. And I think this looks pretty nice, so we'll go with that. And now it's going to set things up. And there we go. Our group has been created. So if you go into our new group, it's pretty empty. Nothing's happened yet. I'm actually going to join a different group where there's already some activity so you can see a little bit more how groups work. So we're going to join the group. And in this History of Japan group, we can go into the chat room. And again, this is sort of like the lobby where people can just talk about whatever. Maybe something that doesn't have to do with a specific episode. There are announcements. So if you're the host of a podcast and you want to send out a notification to all your listeners or all the group members, you can do it through here. And this will send a push notification to everyone on their phone. Down here we have the group playlist. And what's cool about this is any group member who wants to share an episode with the group, they can do it just by adding it to this playlist right here that everyone can see. And then down here is where we see our latest episode comments. And this is kind of the meat of the groups. So if we go in here, we can see a couple comments left by the host for this podcast. You can see a little text comment up here, and you can see a voice comment down here. What's cool about these group comments is that there's always a timestamp associated with a comment. That way, you can click on that and it'll take you straight to that point in the podcast. Skip back about 30 seconds or so. And the point of this is to give other people context for where this comment is coming from, because you see a lot of podcast apps where they just have a comment, but and they're referring to some specific point in the podcast, but it doesn't necessarily say when. Anyway, so there's an example of the comments. I want to show you now how the embedded comments work. Let you see that in action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play from this episode where I know there are a few comments that have been added, and you'll see how these comments get inserted into the podcast. So when someone leaves a text comment and you reach that point in the episode, you will get a push notification, just like that. So if you want to like add things to your podcast, like sometimes you may want to add an image or a Wikipedia link or something like that, you can do that with these little notifications, and it can appear right when you want it to in the podcast. So that's how text comments work. Pretty simple. But now I want to show how voice comments work. And when someone leaves a voice comment, what it's going to do is it's going to pause the podcast, and then it will play the voice comment. And you won't be able to hear it because I don't have the audio hooked up, but you'll see how it works right here. So hit that point in the podcast. The app pauses and will say, Jake says, and then it'll just play Jake's voice comment right then and there. And then once it's done, it will just keep playing the podcast. So it just automatically embeds those comments straight into the podcast. So first question some people may be wondering is like, can I turn this thing off? And the answer to that is yes, you can. You can control it as a host, as controlling the default settings. And then also each group member can customize their own settings too. If they want to override the defaults that you set, they can turn comments on, off. You can even filter by group member. So if you only want to hear from the host or you only want to hear from certain group members, you can do that. And I plan on adding lots of filters in the future, like only play comments only play the comments that the host has endorsed, or only play comments that have at least 15 upvotes, things like that. But again, the point of this is to allow podcasts to become two-way, interactive, and just have that really tight interaction between you and your listeners, which I think would be really cool. I would really like it for some of the podcasts that I listen to. So that's kind of the core features of PodTalk and how it works, what you can do with groups. There's actually a lot more to it. And I may do like a more in-depth demo, because you can do things like set access controls and just other things like that, and ban people and more of the technical stuff. And if people want to see a deep dive of those features, I can do a demo for that too. But I'm just curious if you have any feedback, if you think this is something that you could use for your podcast, something you'd be interested in. Just really curious to hear your feedback and any questions you might have. So I left my contact info in the YouTube description. So please get back to me. Let me know what you think.